You said you'd come. Now let's hope you're not too late.
We know each other. He's a friend from work.
Long talks. Long talks. Talk just a little bit, just for the sake of it. Say what you think of it. Long talks. Long talks. Talk just a little bit, just for the sake of it. Say what you think of it. Long talks. Long talks. Talk just a little bit, just for the sake of it. Say what you think of it.
Welcome to Jumanji.
Hey, welcome to episode number 62 of the Wulong Talks podcast. My name is Jason. I'm the host of the show, as you already know. And once again, unfortunately, I'm not joined by the Wrestling Kid this time, so I'll be flying solo again. So, just a warning right up front to all of you who don't like the sound of my voice. You might want to tune out now because it's just me. Wrestling Kid is still around, don't worry, he hasn't gone anywhere. He's just a little bit busy, so I'm going to plow ahead and go through with this episode tonight. But yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining us. If this is the first time that you're joining us, welcome to Wulong Talks. What we do here is we like to talk about movies, TV shows, video games, comic books, and lots of other things around pop culture and give you our kind of unique take on those things as well. For this episode, we're going to be doing a few different things. So one of the things that I'll be talking about is the recent Oscars and talking about some of the things that went down there from a kind of geek perspective and some of the news that we found out from the award ceremony. We'll also chat a little bit about Resident Evil 2 because I've been playing that and I love it, so I've got to have a chat with you about that. We'll talk some trailer stuff. We'll talk a little bit about some TV shows on Netflix like Umbrella Academy, and we'll also talk a little bit about The Punisher season 2 as well. I'll give you my thoughts on that and how everything has kind of gone down with the Netflix MCU. But first of all, as I said, welcome, and I hope you're well and this podcast finds you in a happy place. I'm all good. I've been very busy myself lately. We are preparing, for those of you who don't know, we're preparing to welcome our first child. That's myself and my wife. And we're very excited, and we're obviously very, very kind of frazzled as well, and trying to make sure that we're doing the right things. So those of you who are parents who are listening to this, I'm sure you'll have plenty of advice to give us over the coming weeks, and I'll be looking to you to give me some advice too. So don't be surprised if I don't pop up in your DMs and start asking you like, how do you change a nappy again? But yeah, that's filled a lot of our time recently, so that's kind of kept us going over the past couple of weeks. The baby will be due any point from now, basically, so whenever you hear this podcast, if you check our social media feeds, you'll probably see a sneaky baby pic or two up on there. Now, as said, we recently had the Oscars go past, and I'm somebody who's not really taken much interest in the Oscars. There was a time when I used to watch the Oscars a lot because it was kind of seen as the pinnacle of movie making, and it was interesting to see kind of the movies that were being honored and what was being given awards and what wasn't, and it was kind of fun to debate. But I've kind of got to a point now where I'm not sure I care that much about the Oscars anymore. It doesn't really kind of shape my opinions on movies. I tend to have got to a place where I'm quite happy with my own opinions on movies, and the choices that I make don't necessarily reflect the choices that the Academy make. But that said, we did get a couple of really significant victories, particularly if you're a comic book movie fan, or if you're a pop culture fan. There were some big wins here to talk about. I wanted to talk about the victories for Black Panther, which I thought were well deserved. First of all, the costume design winner, Ruthie Carter, is a legend in the Hollywood film industry, and some of her work dates back years and years and years. You can go way back into her career, really, from sort of like the late 80s, I believe it is when she got her first break. And I think we'd all agreed that the work she did on Black Panther was amazing in terms of the kind of costume designs that she came up with for the movie. So that is something that I think is really, really well deserved. Another Oscar winner for Black Panther was Hannah Bleacher-Jay, who won for production design, and she's a history maker as well, in that she is the first woman of color, the first black woman to win a production design Oscar. And again, hard to argue with the award of that, because again, one of the things that people really loved about Black Panther, including me and the guys, was the way that movie was designed in terms of the sets and things like that. It was really, really phenomenal work that was done there, in bringing the world of Wakanda to life and bringing Black Panther's world to life. It was unbelievable work. So again, really well deserved Oscar. Another one that the movie picked up as well was for its soundtrack. It won the best original score, which again, hard to argue against it, because the work that was done by the music supervisor Ludwig Göransson is phenomenal. I mean, I know again he's another one who has a real track record in Hollywood of producing some sterling work, and he really outdid himself with Black Panther. If none of you have seen the mini documentary about his journey that he went on to kind of working towards putting that movie soundtrack together, I strongly urge you watch it. It's absolutely brilliant. It's on the extras on the Black Panther DVD, or if you've got the Blu-ray, it'll be in the extras for the Blu-ray. And it's just worth seeing because of his journey to the different countries in Africa and meeting different musicians from that part of the world and collaborating with them, and the kind of energy they brought together with his music background and their music background, and collaborating together to create this truly phenomenal sound that sticks out as much as anything else within the Black Panther movie. You really do appreciate kind of what he does there. So that was wonderful stuff, and great to hear that he won the Oscar for that. Aside from that, we also got a massive win for Into the Spiderverse, which is one that really, really warmed our hearts here at Wulong Talks. As you know, me and Rich are massive fans of that movie. We really thought it was incredible, the work that they did, and they managed to win the Best Animated Movie Oscar, which, as said, is just wonderful news. We're really, really happy for that. And Rich and I were talking about this outside of the podcast, and we were wondering if these victories are going to change things for comic book movies, because part of the reason I said why I don't really like the Oscars or don't really follow the Oscars that closely anymore is because a lot of the movies that we like are often overlooked, and that includes comic book movies and sci-fi and horror. They're often disregarded by the Academy, even though these are the movies that tend to make the money that Hollywood needs in order to exist. And oftentimes, as said, they're kind of treated like a bastard cousin in some ways, and not really treated as the works of art that they are, and that they should be taken for that. And that's not to say that all of them are fantastic and deserve the highest honors of recognition, but certainly over the years there's been many examples that I can think of, and I'm sure all of you could think of, that probably deserved some recognition from the Academy and never got it. So hopefully these victories here for Black Panther and Into the Spider-Verse will maybe slowly start to change the Academy's opinion of these kinds of movies and what these kind of movies represent to the audience who watch them. So kudos to them for winning those awards. That was wonderful news to kind of wake up to in the morning. Aside from the Oscars, there is a couple of other things that I said I wanted to talk to you about as well. One of the things that I wanted to mention actually was something that I discovered recently just on my Spotify when I was kind of scrolling through it. And that's a storytelling podcast called Wolverine: The Long Night. I believe it was produced by Stitcher Premium, and Marvel were working in conjunction with them to produce this story about Wolverine. the podcast is really well done, I've got to say. Like, you know, I know initially it was released on Stitcher Premium, so you had to have a Stitcher Premium account in order to listen to it when it released, but it's now available free for you to listen to on Spotify. And I urge you to do it, especially if you're into, you know, kind of storytelling podcasts and things like that, and especially if you're a comic book fan as well. Wolverine is a really good choice of a character to fit into that kind of world, because you don't need to be overly descriptive in terms of you know, what's happening. The way that they handle the kind of fight scenes and the action is quite clever as well, because obviously in a podcast you can't have a narrator, you know, just describing in detail what happens in the scene, because it just doesn't work, and it takes the viewer, or the listener in this case, out of the story. So it's almost kind of told in flashback, with, you know, these interviews being conducted by these investigators who are basically trying to track down Wolverine, and these witnesses describing what they see in their interactions with him. Wolverine actually features in the story himself as well. He's played by Richard Armitage, who, if you know British TV, then you'll know Richard Armitage from many British TV shows. He was also, I believe he was the King Dwarf in the Hobbit movies. I don't know the Hobbit movies that well, so I can't remember his name. Sorry, but I'm sure one of you out there listening will know who I'm talking about. So Richard Armitage provides the voice of Wolverine, and he's really good at it. Like, really, really good. He gives a lot of gravitas and believability to the character. And the scripts are so well written in the podcast as well that it's, you know, it comes off as quite believable. And I think, you know, this is a really interesting avenue for comic books and comic book companies to take a look at, because, you know, Marvel has shown here that it can be done if you pick the right character and you bring together you know, a really talented voice cast, and you bring together good writers, and this is something that really, really does work. So I think it's something that, you know, presents another opportunity. Comic books, as we know, you know, are having their struggles at the moment in terms of sales and general interest and getting people interested in them. And perhaps this may be a new way to, you know, kind of draw in a different audience and to get people interested in finding out more about comic book characters. So it'd be interesting to see what the developments are with that going forward. Apparently there are plans for a sequel to The Long Night. When that's going to come out, I don't know. There isn't anything up at the moment that I've been able to find about any scheduled sort of release dates for that yet, but apparently there are plans to do another one, and I'm presuming if that one goes well, then we could see other characters get the treatment too. So yeah, very interesting, and definitely, as said, worth checking out. So if you haven't heard that yet, go and listen to that. Now, I recently, I mean, as you guys know, if you've been listening to Wulong Talks for a while, you know, I'm class myself as a part-time gamer. I'm not somebody who has a lot of time to kind of spend gaming, and when I do get to spend some time gaming, I've got to play it in like sort of hour and a half increments. Otherwise, I kind of find I get too sucked in to the point where I could quite easily spend 6 or 7 hours playing a game, and that's not good when you've got a house to maintain. So I try not to kind of get too sucked into games, and I've had that in the past where I've got into games and really just disappeared into them. I mean, you all know about me and Yakuza. Like, that's how my background is. You know, Yakuza is a game I've spent hours and hours and hours playing. Still haven't finished playing Yakuza 6 yet, so yeah, you'll get some updates on that eventually. But yeah, you know, gaming is something that I try and do in small blocks. But recently I've had the opportunity to play Resident Evil 2 with my cousin, and I've got to say that Resident Evil 2 is so good. It's just so good. It's brought back so many memories. But also what I like about it is to me it shows how to do a game remake the right way, in a sense that it uses the technology that's available via the power of the PS4, and and it doesn't waste any of the capabilities of that system at all. Even though certain scenes are basically ported directly from the original PlayStation 2 version, it's not just a straight up port in a sense that, the AI on the zombies is better, the AI on the lickers is better. It uses the atmosphere superbly well. The visuals on the actual game itself are stunning, and the sound design is brilliant as well, even better than it was on the PlayStation 2 version. And yeah, the gameplay's just been immense. I mean, as I said, me and my cousin have been playing this now for about a week and a half, and we've got pretty far in it. We've got up to the point where you are stuck in the sewers and you're trying to escape the mutant crocodile. That's not a spoiler, by the way. I mean, if you've played Resident Evil 2 before, you know about that, so that's not a spoiler. But yeah, as I said, so far we're both loving it, because it's as I said, it manages to keep the spirit of Resident Evil 2 from PlayStation 2, and just upgrade it into a world and into a set of technologies that really know how to exploit and bring out the best in that game and the ideals of that game. The main characters that you can play as are Claire Redfield and Leon Kennedy. Both of their stories are quite interesting as well. We've chosen to go with Leon, so we've been playing the game as Leon, but once we finish that, I do want to play through with Claire as well, because I know, or from what I've heard anyway, with Claire you get different weapons and things like that, and the story changes slightly as well, so I'd be interested to see it from Claire Redfield's side as well. But that is a game I've got to recommend highly to you. So if you've got a PS4 and you're looking for a game to get into, Resident Evil 2 is definitely the one, man, so go and check that out. Now, we're going to get onto some trailers chat as well in a mo. Just give me a second here. Let me grab a swig of water. Ooh. That hits the spot. Thank you very much for your patience there. So yeah, we've had a couple of new trailers that have come out recently as well. And I'm kind of liking the trailers. Well, 2 out of the 3 I'm liking, let's say. So we recently got another trailer for Detective Pikachu, which is the adaptation of the Nintendo Game Boy game that will be coming out this year, which stars Ryan Reynolds as the voice of Pikachu and Justice Smith. That is myself and Alvin, Big A the Mank Geek, who features sometimes on the show as well, discussed this quite a few episodes back, and I'll link to the old episode when the announcement first came out that they were making a Detective Pikachu movie, because we were both in absolute shock, because we just couldn't believe that Hollywood was considering making a movie of this obscure game that isn't even really in the main Pokemon series, so to speak. It's an offshoot of that and a spin-off of that, and basically is around Pikachu as a detective, and it is as bonkers as it sounds. So if you're familiar with Pokemon and you're familiar with Pikachu, that is as wild as it gets. But this trailer is brilliant. I love it. Like, I really do. I mean, I love the teaser trailer. And this trailer does have a big reveal in it, which I know some people weren't too happy about, but I wasn't too bothered, because I kind of expected that we were going to get this reveal at some point anyway, because I remember reading that there were some rumors that Mewtwo would play a part in the movie, and if those of you who have seen the older Pokemon movies, the animated movie and things like that, you'll remember Mewtwo, especially if you know the games as well. And it didn't come as a surprise to me to find out that Mewtwo was going to be in the game. Going to be in the movie. But yeah, I thought it was the trailer was bonkers, but just brilliant. I mean, it actually looks like a stroke of genius casting Ryan Reynolds as Detective Pikachu, as the voice of Detective Pikachu, because his sense of humor and his kind of laconic kind of wit is is almost perfect for Detective Pikachu. Especially if you want to, kind of play up the ridiculousness of the story and of the idea, which is what this movie is doing. And what I like as well is it's not shying away from the ridiculousness of it. It's telling you this is stupid, this is ridiculous, but hang on in there, we're going to have some fun. And I'm cool with that. I'm totally down with that. I'm not going to name all of the Pikachu in the trailer because there was too many, and some of them I couldn't even remember anyway because it's been a while since I've actually played Pokemon. But it looks like, basically all of the kind of major Pokemon that you would expect to see in there are in there, although I haven't seen any Team Rocket in this one. I know, strictly speaking, they don't necessarily play a part in the Detective Pikachu game, but I got a sneaky feeling we might get some Team Rocket in there somewhere, I think that might be a surprise that they pull later on. But otherwise, as said, visually, it looks really stunning. Some of the set pieces look fun as well. I mean, there's a really cool scene shown in the trailer of like a Pokemon parade where it looks like Pikachu is trying to escape from Mewtwo, and the way kind of the sets are designed and things like that are really good. The animation looks top notch as well. The CGI looks great. I like Justice Smith as well. That's, for those of you that don't know, that's Richard's best friend from The Get Down, from that Netflix TV series that was sadly cancelled. But I like what I'm seeing so far. It looks like it's staying true to Pokemon's roots. As said, it's playing up the fact that, this movie is kind of ridiculous, but is sticking to that and is saying, you know what? Yeah, it's weird, but join us. You're going to have a laugh. So yeah, said I'm down with that, and I'll be very excited to see Detective Pikachu when it comes out, which I believe... don't hold me to this, but I think it is in June of this year. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, I think it's June this year that we should get it in the UK. So let us know if you're going to be checking that out as well, man. Drop us a line on social media. You'll find out how to do that at the end of this podcast. But yeah, let us know if you're looking forward to it, because we definitely are. The other trailers that we got were a Red Band trailer for Hellboy. This is the Hellboy, I guess, a reboot, for those that are familiar with the original Hellboy movie series that came out a few years ago, directed by Guillermo del Toro, with starring Ron Perlman. I kind of like this. I did like this trailer. The very first teaser trailer that they dropped, it still took a little while for me to get my head around the fact that Hellboy was not going to be played by Ron Perlman. But to be honest, it actually kind of, they've gone for a slightly different look for Hellboy, that in a way is almost a bit more comic book accurate, I would say, than the look that Ron Perlman had. But I actually kind of like it. It's growing on me. It's got a more rough look, a more rough and ready look to the makeup and to the costume design for Hellboy, and I'm kind of cool with that. I do like it. I do. If you're going to remake something like this, which we live in the era of remakes, so there's no point getting upset about these things anymore. I think you might as well go for it and try and do something that makes your remake a little bit different to what came before. And the feeling with this is that this is definitely going to be something very different. So I'm down with that. The trailer that I saw was a Red Band trailer, so it was complete with a bit of blood and a few F-bombs. Did that make any difference to me? No, not really. Because I do like the original Hellboy movies anyway, but I'm quite cool, as said, with this trailer. I like the kind of story they're going for, the slightly apocalyptic story. The cast in this one looks pretty good. I mean, David Harbour as Hellboy is a great choice. I think he is a great choice. And even though, as said, it took me a while to kind of get my head around the fact that Hellboy was not going to be Ron Perlman, I think David Harbour is going to do a good job from what I've seen on the trailer. So, there's a lot of potential there. Mila Jovovich is going to be in it as well. We've got Daniel Day Kim in there as Ben Daimyo. Ian McShane as well is in it, and whenever you can put Lovejoy in anything, you've got me. So yeah, that's good enough for me. Sorry. Lovejoy, for you Americans who are listening, that's a really obscure reference that only the Brits are going to get, but look up Lovejoy. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to Hellboy. I do think that there, as said, is a lot of potential for this franchise, and this second trailer is a very, very strong trailer. I think much stronger than the teaser trailer they released. So, yep, I'm looking forward to that as well. The other big trailer that we got is one that gotta be frank with you, I'm not really looking forward to much, and that is X-Men Dark Phoenix. Now this looks like it's going to be the final movie from the X-Men franchise as it is, under the control of Fox and under the stewardship of Fox Studios. This is returning all of the cast that you would recognize from basically from X-Men Days of Future Past and X-Men Apocalypse, going all the way back to X-Men First Class pretty much, and all of those characters. So that's James McAvoy as Professor Xavier. I've forgotten the dude's name again who plays Magneto. Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, as Mystique. I didn't really know. I came away after watching the trailer feeling like I've seen this movie already, and it's called X-Men The Last Stand. That's how I felt about it. I mean, it didn't feel in any way different to that movie to me. Both of these movies kind of cover the Dark Phoenix storyline from the comic books. For those who don't know, basically back of a fag paper summarization, Jean Grey, the telepath, becomes one with the Phoenix Force, a cosmic entity from space, and the Phoenix Force kind of magnifies her telekinesis powers and her telepathic powers, but it kind of drives her insane, basically. And I mean, you pretty much got that from the trailer anyway, because the trailer is just so full of spoilers. I don't know what they were thinking. But it just felt to me like, as said, I'm not seeing what the difference is between this and X-Men The Last Stand, really. I mean, okay, I guess the plots are going to be different in a sense that Dark Phoenix is going to lean more on the Dark Phoenix storyline from the X-Men comic books, or so it appears. And there'll be a bit of space, and that's kind of it, really. I'm kind of done with Fox's X-Men anyway. I did like Days of Future Past. Richard didn't like it. But I did. I really enjoyed that. But X-Men Apocalypse for me just ruined the whole thing, and I was so frustrated with that film that I just kind of checked out from the X-Men movies after that, really. And I gotta say, based on this trailer, I don't have much hope for it going forward. I mean, we know it's over anyway because Disney now have the rights back to the X-Men, and it's just a matter of time until Disney and Marvel decide to reboot those characters and introduce them into the MCU. And to be honest, I'm more looking forward to that, really. This X-Men I'm kind of done with. They've had their time, and basically they've messed up their own timeline so many times that I can't tell who should be where and when, and the acting is just patchy, and the scripts are patchy, and sometimes they dip a toe into the comic books, sometimes they don't, and I'm just really kind of not feeling it, as you can probably tell. So I don't know if I'll be going to see X-Men Dark Phoenix, to be honest. Probably not. if I have to be 100% honest with you, because I just can't see any reason why I would want to pay my money to go to the cinema to see that. So I'll probably wait for it to arrive on home video at some point and go then. But yeah, I won't be rushing to see that. But, you know, maybe you guys are quite excited by it. And if you are, let us know. As I said, let's have the chat and have a conversation, because I'd love to speak to some people who are looking forward to it. So let us know your thoughts. As I said, at the end of this podcast, you'll find out how to get in touch with us. Now, there's some TV that I've been watching recently as well that I do want to talk about. As always, as you know, I'm a Netflix junkie. You know, I love talking about the stuff that I find on Netflix. I recently did a review of the Korean horror drama Kingdom, which I absolutely loved. And you can find that, by the way, on this podcast channel. So if you do want to have a listen to that, make sure you check out our podcast channel and have a look for the Kingdom non-spoilers review. Give that a listen, and you'll get a sense of how we feel about that series. But Netflix in general, as I said, has really kind of been going well with their series of late. I've really enjoyed a lot that they've put out. And one of the things that I've enjoyed recently is Umbrella Academy. Now, Umbrella Academy is a comic book I had heard of, but I really had never read, so I didn't really know anything about it at all. So I kind of went into this blind, really. I knew it was written by Gerard Way, and the artwork was done by Gabriel Barr. But I didn't know much about the characters or the plot or anything like that. And from, you know, what I saw in the TV series, it was a really interesting kind of take that they've taken on, you know, some of the traditions and the tropes of superhero teams and kind of how those dynamics function. Funny enough, talking about X-Men, it reminded me a lot of X-Men in terms of the kind of character backgrounds and how the team is put together, so to speak. But it's done in a way that is quite quirky and quite left field, and you know, some of the characters are very trying, to say the least. They're people who've got a lot of flaws and, you know, a lot of issues, and the series does a great job of kind of balancing these characters, these multiple characters across the shows, and handling the interactions between them and things like that. So it really is a good watch. I mean, I don't want to go too much into details for those who haven't seen it yet. But I would say, you know, if you haven't seen it, give it a try. It's definitely worth a watch. Definitely worth a watch. It's a bit off the wall. As I said, it's a bit quirky, and, you know, that might not be to everybody's taste. But if you're patient with it, you will get a lot of reward out of it, because the things that they're able to pull off visually with that show really impressed me. You know, the special effects are really, really impressive. The action is really good as well. You know, the action choreography is really, really good, in fact, for what it is. And as I said, the characters are really strong. And also make sure you look out for Mary J. Blige as well. Not just because she's the queen of hip hop soul, but because she's really fantastic in this. You know, I'm really impressed by what she's done with her acting career up to this point, because she's really not gone for a lot of the typical roles that somebody from her background would go for. She's clearly tried to kind of push herself in a different direction and tried to, you know, do something different. And this is the character she plays, and this is definitely a character that's very different, but she kills it. She does a great job with it. So yeah, I would say, you know, Umbrella Academy is definitely worth a watch. So make sure you go and check that out. That's on Netflix right now. The other thing I've been watching on Netflix is The Punisher. Now, I've almost finished season 2. I'm not quite seen the last episode because I keep falling asleep. Not because it's boring, but just because I keep putting it on at like 1 a.m, watching the first 10 minutes and then drifting off. You know, it's a thing. We all do it. Let's be honest. But yeah, the Punisher I've enjoyed so far. I haven't enjoyed everything about it. I felt that this season it's kind of lacking a little bit in terms of depth for the characters, I felt. And it feels a bit to me like they've kind of decided that with this season that they were going to amp up the action and lessen some of the psychodrama behind it. And I guess that's not a bad thing, but I'm somebody who kind of appreciates the psychodrama. In fact, I don't mind that at all. That's what I really enjoyed about The Punisher season 1 was, kind of trying to explain Frank's psyche and his motivations and why he kind of thinks the way he does and why he views the world in the way that he does. And, that was quite enjoyable. And John Bernthal as the Punisher is just phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal. Like, you can't, if you had dream castings and, wanted to pick somebody to play the Punisher, he would be the guy that I think everybody, would go for. I mean, I remember when he was cast as the Punisher in Daredevil season 2, and I remember everybody who, kind of knew him primarily from what he did as Shane in the Walking Dead TV series thought, yeah, that's a great casting choice, and it proved to be the case. I mean, he was he was absolutely, for me, he was clearly the best thing about Daredevil season 2. And he's really got tremendous presence, and he brings a lot of depth to Frank Castle, and you really believe him when he talks about the kind of things that the character of Frank has gone through and how it's affected him. You believe him, you believe what he's saying. So it's a phenomenal piece of work he's done here, and it's a shame, as you know by now, that the Punisher has been cancelled, so there will be no more Punisher series at Netflix. This will be the legacy of what he's done, and if that's the case, then he should be proud in terms of the work that he's done. But that said, as said, I do feel like Punisher season 2 kind of has some elements that haven't quite worked for me. The reintroduction of Ben Barnes' character Billy Russo was not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, we all knew it was coming anyway. If you are familiar with the Punisher comics, then Billy Russo is one of Frank Castle's chief antagonists, really. So he was always going to make a return. But I was a bit confused with the way they were trying to handle his character. I know that the idea was to try and provide some depth and some motivation to his character, and it's admirable that they tried to kind of explore, I guess, the after effects of what happened to Billy Russo at the end of Punisher season 1. But I could not buy into this romance between him and the Doctor. Like, I thought that was just the laziest of lazy plot devices. It really worked to the point where it irritated me, and it turned me off of the character of the Doctor. Sorry, what I'm referring to is that in part of the story here, Billy is receiving psychological analysis and help to overcome his injuries that he suffered at the end of season 1, and as a result of that, a relationship develops between him and this psychoanalyst, or this therapist that he's seeing. And as said, for me, it just felt a little bit cliched and a little bit lazy, and just, did we really need to have that? No, not really. It didn't really tell us anything about Billy Russo, and it didn't really tell us anything about the Doctor either. And I kind of felt that, they just sort of put that in there to add another element to the story, rather than it being kind of a pressing thing that needed to be addressed. So for me, that kind of disappointed me a bit. There are some new villains in this season, one of whom I thought was really, really interesting, and that's Pilgrim, who is basically, without spoiling it too much, is a religious hitman, I guess is the best way to describe it. But he's got a really, really interesting backstory and does have an excellent character arc as well. And he is really one of the strong points of this season. So I really enjoyed what they kind of did with him. That's definitely something that stood out from the series, and I enjoyed that. I also liked the return of Agent Madani as well. And funnily enough, I think they kind of handled, with Agent Madani, I felt that they kind of handled her reaction to the events that unfold in Punisher Season 2 better than they did Billy Russo. To me, her actions were more believable. I bought it more in terms of what she was doing. I think because Amber Rose Reva is just a terrific actress, but also because I just think they spent more time investing in kind of her story and what the impact would be of the things that she experienced in Punisher Season 1 on her professionally and personally. And to me, I just, as I said, I kind of just bought it more from her and bought into what she was doing. Aside from that, again, I don't want to get into too many spoilers if you haven't seen it already. This is not a spoiler review, so I don't want to go too deep into all of that. But I did find it quite entertaining overall. There's lots and lots of action in this season. In fact, all of the Netflix shows, maybe bar Jessica Jones, have kind of ramped up the action from their second seasons. I don't know if that was a conscious decision that was made, but Punisher 2 Season 2 has definitely picked up the pace with the action. It's quite bloody and quite gruesome, as you might expect from a character like the Punisher. But it's very entertaining and it's well done. So I would give them great credit for that. They really do handle the action scenes really, really well in this series. I will finish up the final episode of that, and then what I'll do is I will do a special podcast with me and Rich when we can get the posse back together, and we'll do some spoilers chat and go into a bit of detail about that. But as I mentioned earlier, you're probably all aware by now that The Punisher has been cancelled, and also Jessica Jones has been cancelled as well by Netflix. So we will get a third and final season of Jessica Jones, but after that will be it. And then all of the Marvel shows will be done with Netflix. Now, as you know, I mean, again, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I'm a big time stan of the Netflix Marvel universe. I've I really bought into the universe and bought into what they were doing because for me, growing up, some of my favorite Marvel comic books were the ones that focused on street level characters. I read my fair share of kind of cosmic stuff and things with godlike beings and things like that. But the ones that resonated more with me were the street level heroes, because I felt I could always identify more with them because they seemed to deal with more real world problems than some of the the bigger and grander kind of heroes that you get within those universes. So I remember when the announcements were made that Netflix was partnering with Marvel and they were going to produce these 4 shows featuring Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones and Iron Fist, and that they were going to bring them together towards the end to make a team up series called The Defenders. Well, you can stick a fork in me because I was done. I was over the moon about that. I really was. I was so pumped. And the series that we've got, I mostly enjoyed them. I had kind of issues here and there with certain seasons of certain shows, and Iron Fist, and me and Richard have gone to town and back on Iron Fist on many an occasion, so I'm not going to kick that particular show here. But I was generally, as said, really sold on what they were trying to do. But as time kind of went by and we got different seasons and different stories were followed, it became kind of clear to me that when initially they announced these shows and said, everything's connected, in a sense that everything was going to be connected to the cinematic universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, it became clear from the shows themselves that that was not really the case. I mean, there was passing reference made here and there, but generally speaking, these shows were, their own kind of entity and their own thing. And looking back at it now, all of these shows have been cancelled. I kind of feel like, I don't know, I kind of feel like they made a mistake with that almost, with hindsight being 2020 vision. It just feels to me like it may have been better if maybe they'd said that, they'd stuck to the 4 shows being connected. So saying, these 4 shows we're going to do are connected, and this is going to be our Marvel cinematic universe, our Marvel TV universe, if you will. Kind of what DC has done with the Arrowverse, and how, the Arrowverse is connected to Arrow being connected to Supergirl, being connected to Legends of Tomorrow, being connected to, so on and so forth. All of those shows kind of exist within the same world, and you can have characters appear at different times. And, that is, for me, is kind of what I thought we were going to get with the Marvel Netflix shows. But it didn't quite happen. I mean, we got a couple of, characters crossed over here and there, but the only recurring characters that we had across multiple shows often was Turk and Night Nurse. They were really the only characters that we got. The rest of them kind of, as said, you may get a cameo here and a cameo there in different shows, but that was about it. So it felt like there wasn't really a grand scheme or a grand vision for what they were intending to do with this universe. And maybe that's a bit unfair, because I mean, if you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that's something that has taken many years of planning and meetings and hiring different writers and directors who were prepared to kind of honor the overarching story while still providing their own tale for specific characters and things like that. That's not an easy thing to do, as we've seen. Every attempt at a cinematic universe, quote unquote, seems to fail if it's not the MCU, because it's a tricky thing to get right from a creative point of view, from a logistics point of view. It's difficult. So maybe I'm being a bit harsh in thinking that, the Netflix Marvel setup should have been the same. But I guess the fan in me, that's what I wanted. That's what I thought we were going to get when we got these shows. Ultimately, we didn't get them. And then after that, we then started to find out about Disney's plans for its own streaming service called Disney Plus, which should be launching at some point this year. And it became clear pretty early on in the piece that if Disney are starting their own streaming service, well, how is that going to work with what Marvel were doing at Netflix? And then you started to kind of hear rumblings about, certain directions that were being taken with the Marvel Netflix shows, and how, Netflix were unhappy with certain decisions that were made, and that the two parties couldn't agree on kind of creative things. I'm not sure I buy that totally, because Netflix, to me, from what I know about them, are pretty easygoing and don't really interfere too much with filmmakers and TV writers and showrunners too much. They generally like to leave people alone to get on with what they're doing. And also, Netflix is quite happy to carry shows for years that have low viewing figures. So when they kind of said that, they were cancelling Iron Fist because the viewing figures were down and things like that, I kind of took that with a bit of a pinch of salt, because, as said, there's plenty of shows on Netflix, in your Netflix library right now, that I guarantee you people are not watching, yet they're still there. So, if the desire was to cancel these shows because there weren't enough views, I'm not sure I really buy that. And then when Luke Cage got cancelled, and they kind of used the same argument, and then Daredevil got cancelled and they used the same argument again, and I was just like, nah, it's clear that that's maybe there's a small part of that that's playing a part in Netflix's decision making, but I doubt it. I think it's quite clear now that these were political decisions that were made because Disney now represents a threat to Netflix because they've started their own streaming service, because they have access to the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the characters that exist within that, and therefore the built-in audience that follows that. Sorry, I keep dropping my pen. I don't know why I'm coming so clumsy. Move that over there. It became clear that, the Disney and Marvel are now a threat to Netflix. So Netflix are probably looking at what Disney and Marvel are doing and thinking, well, why do we need to give you free advertising for your Marvel brand, by retaining these characters and these stories when effectively you're going to be competing against us for our audience? Which I guess is understandable from Netflix's position. As said, from the fans' point of view, it sucks because, a lot of us had invested in these characters, be it the Punisher or Daredevil or Jessica Jones or Luke Cage or Iron Fist. There's fans out there who have invested in these characters and invested in these shows. So to kind of have the rug pulled out from underneath you is really frustrating. But perhaps it isn't the end. There was recently some reports that surfaced in the media that Hulu, which is a US-based streaming service, so the American listeners will know about Hulu, is potentially interested in taking on some of these characters. So that might be, maybe there is a future for these characters after all, after we thought, this was all done and dusted and we'd never see them again. Now, there's conflicting reports about kind of when these characters can be used again. The more kind of reliable sources seem to suggest that it will take about 2 years before anybody can kind of start to work on, a new Daredevil show, for example, or something like that. But I don't know, if that affects Hulu. Now, Hulu is pretty much now has Disney as a majority shareholder, which basically means that Disney owns most of it. I think it's about 60% of Hulu as a company. So, if Disney choose to, then they can take the characters that have been cancelled by Netflix from the Netflix shows and move them over to Hulu, which, if it means that we get to see more Charlie Cox as Daredevil and, Kristen Ritter as Jessica Jones, then I'm for it. I'm all for it. So we'll have to wait and see, folks, basically. We're still a way away from where any of this can happen. And we don't know, as I said, I'm kind of just speculating and going off different reports that I've read online as to what could happen here. So we don't know for sure, where and how this plays out. But if you're a fan of these shows like me, then I'm sure you're got your fingers crossed, got your toes crossed, and are hoping for the best with that. All right, well, I think that's most of the talking points I wanted to cover on this episode. I'm sorry this is a shorter episode than usual. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we do have a baby on the way, and it's not going to be long at all until the baby is with us. I'm very excited about it, and I'm trying to kind of make sure I get everything I need to do done for the baby. So it means my time is a little bit limited, and it means also that we may have less podcasts and less podcast activity on the channel than we usually have. I do apologize for that, but it is, it's life, man. But we'll try and do our best. Richard has said we'll be back. Without a doubt, he'll be back. In fact, he'll probably be back sooner than you realise. So he no doubt will want to stick his 10 pence in and give you some thoughts on some of the things he's watching and the games he's playing at the moment as well. So yeah, stick around with us, and be patient, because we do have lots of things we want to cover over the coming weeks and months. So stick with us. Make sure you subscribe to us as well on the podcast channel that you're listening to us on. So whatever that may be, whether that be Spotify or SoundCloud or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, just hit that subscribe button. And that way you'll always stay up to date with what we're doing and when we're doing it. Now, before we go, I just wanted to give a couple of shout outs. Firstly, a big thank you as always to Rob Wade from Emotionally 14. This podcast is E14 endorsed. What does that mean? It means that we're part of a small group of shows that Rob has collated together over at the Emotionally 14 channel at emotionally14.com. You can find out more about our show and a few other terrific shows over on that podcast channel. So go and check out emotionally14.com for more info. Also want to give a big shout out as well to the Britpod scene. You'll always see us hashtag the Britpod scene on social media. That is a British podcast collective full of independent podcasters who cover just about every topic you can think of. So whatever your bag is, I guarantee you will find it on the Britpod scene. So make sure you go and visit them at britpodscene.com or look for the Britpod scene on social media as well. And lastly, I wanted to give a big shout out as well to a new podcaster who's joined the podcasting journey, and that's M from Verbal Diorama. She just started her first episode. It's available now on Spotify, and it should be available on Apple Podcasts as well. And it's all about the incredible animated movie Titan AE. If you remember that, like I remember that, then that's one you need to be checking out, because M does a great job of kind of breaking down that movie, plus a bit of the history behind the studio that produced it and all sorts as well. She's a great podcast host, and I think she's doing terrific things, and she's going to go on to do really big things as well. So make sure you go and check her show out. It's called Verbal Diorama, and as said, you'll find it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. And you can follow her on Twitter too. She's fun to follow on Twitter at Verbal Diorama, and also on Instagram at Verbal Diorama. And lastly, we haven't forgotten about the Bebop rewatch. As said, we've just had lots of stuff going on, and it is what it is. But the Bebop rewatch will be back soon. So for those of you who enjoy me and Richard talking about the greatest anime ever made, Cowboy Bebop, make sure you stick around for that. And make sure you're following us on social media as well, because we'll give you some updates on that very soon. Now, if you haven't listened to the little trailer at the end of the podcast, we'll let you know how you can get in touch with us and do all of those things. Okay, well, thank you for listening, guys. As I said, thank you for being patient with us. I know it's been a bit sporadic in terms of the podcast output from Wulong Talks, but as said, lots going on. And hopefully by the time you hear me again, which might be next week or the week after possibly, I'll have a little baba on my lap when I'm recording. All right, folks, take care, and I'll see you next week. Peace. Thanks for listening to us. If you're down with Wulong Talks, show some love by following us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at Wulong Talks. You can also find us online at www.wulongtalks.com or drop us an email at wulongtalkspodcast@gmail.com. We can also be found as part of the Britpod Scene Collective, and we're also officially E14 endorsed. Search for those hashtags to enjoy more content from us and from other great British podcasters.